Right, we're doing chapter 7, Are You Blind? And I think what stands out to me tremendously in this chapter is I'll show you the photos. A person would look at that and perceive that this girl just has it all together. And it's such a stark reminder that you never, ever, ever know what someone's going through and the depths of what someone is going through. Even myself, I didn't even know the full truth of what I was going through. And I know that sounds strange. Let me explain it. Your subconscious mind runs 95% of your life. Only 5% of our lives is conscious decisions. And your subconscious has been programmed by your own life experiences. And I was only in my mid 40s when I discovered the most horrific truth. It was something that had happened to me when I was 3 years old, and I had no recollection of it, like nothing. But and it was so horrific that I actually went into a state of not being able to communicate. Like I was mute. I couldn't say anything for, I think it was just short of 2 weeks. But ultimately, what it did for me was it enabled me to heal, to truly know the truth, because the truth will set you free. Anyway, so let's get going with chapter 7. And if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask any questions. My life is literally an open book to help empower whoever needs it. Hello, Malin.
Hello, sorry I'm late. It was crazy day.
No problems, my love. No problems. All right. By age 16, I'd lost a lot of weight. Although modeling and fashion shows remained a constant after winning the school's beauty personality contest, my parents must have decided it was time to up the game. The modeling school classes and all rehearsals were now happening at home. The outside patio area lent itself perfectly to a ramp. I often desperately wanted just to talk to my mom about how I was feeling about school, my friend, or boom. There just never seemed to be time for any of that. Our house always seemed full of beauty and perfection. The feeling of wanting to be loved and accepted was so real. However, living in a world of perfection took its toll. Ricky was a rising golf star on a world champion level. The conversations always revolved around him and his mind blowing abilities as a young, up and coming golfer, who by this stage had chosen to go to the school I had left like a bag of trash. He was the school's blue eyed boy, the international sports hero. Other conversations were about other models like Barbie, who had won so many titles, including the huge Miss Cabana event, or the new talents who my parents thought were excelling. These conversations were the norm. My misbehavior was never really discussed. It was dealt with by the belt behind a closed door. We would sit around the dinner table for our evening meal, where we would share our day. What could I share? My 30 laxatives, the fact that I'm still thin because I threw up my lunch, that I skipped class. No, hell no. So I would remain silent. Dad would go off on a tangent, literally retelling us of Ricky's entire golf game. From the club he used, the lay of the grass, the wind that was blowing, and of course his amazing attitude. Whilst all this was happening, Ricky and I would shoot peas at each other. We were taught to eat what was on our plate. My parents decided to enter me into the sought after Red Cross debutante competition. There were various projects that we did. We held a huge raffle for a badger buggy that Dad must have somehow got sponsored. We also organized a horse racing day. Wow, I remember that day like yesterday. Incredible. Sorry. Organized a horse racing day where we got big corporations that would sponsor different horse races. And we had a VIP room for the day. I remember that day well. Exquisitely made up, circulating amongst the high flyers, champagne in hand, thanking them all for their amazing support. My life was very full of going to school, coming home, then getting dressed up to the nines, high heels, red lips, and all. I learned this from my mother, who loved red lipstick and divining the glamour of starlets from head to toe. Red was her shade every day until the day she died, and she wore it well. For every event, Dad and I would head off in the car whilst he prepped me on what to say and do. Whenever we arrived at our destination, I would practice for him, then head off on my own to seek the man in charge of whatever company it was we were going to go for sponsorships. My heart would pound a bit as I explained I was a debutante for Red Cross and was hoping they would support me by paying whatever it was towards either the horse racing event, golf day event, or design fashion show. It was very seldom I returned to my dad, waiting patiently in the car without victory. It was a very different feeling of accomplishment from the old days when Dad would cheer me on in the pool. Instead of trophies as a prize, I was bringing cash. There was a designer show I did with a designer called Fuzzley, who was in Cape Town. We flew him up for a fashion show exhibiting his designs. One of the designs I wore was lingerie. It was an exquisite piece consisting of different fabrics and embroidery. A bra, panties, corset all in one. The bottom section was only slightly broader than a G-string, with fishnet stockings and a long black feather boa. The ensemble was finished off perfectly with a cigarette and long filter a la 1960s. The choreography entailed me walking amongst the audience and being flirtatious with the men. I was 17. My father was the compere for that show, the MC. I remember feeling very exposed coming out and doing that kind of thing in front of him, wondering what he would say. It's so strange looking back on it now that not one word was spoken about it. Somehow all this was okay. The pressure to win, to be crowned queen, was intense. It's all my father spoke of. There was no way of knowing for certain what the other girls had or hadn't raised, so it remained breathtakingly intense right until the announcement that I was indeed queen. Not just queen, but I had broken a long-standing record. I must actually go and check those records. After they announced the queen, a waltz with the mayor of Port Elizabeth followed. I'm sure for my parents, a very proud moment indeed. I was in the newspapers all the time, either advertising an upcoming event or the result of an event. If it was a beautiful sunny day, the newspaper house would contact my parents. They would make me up a photo shoot of me in my bikini at the pool, and I would be on the front cover of the paper. If it was a cold winter's day, the same thing would apply, just a different outfit. This was back in a time in South Africa when they didn't think about the consequences of giving out the names and addresses of minors or women to the public. This resulted in me getting phone calls that started off first with silence, then onto heavy breathing, and finally telling me what I was wearing. It terrified me. We called in the police and they put plans in place to catch the stalker. Whoever it was must have gotten knowledge of this because the calls stopped. That same year, my parents wanted me to enter Miss Cabana. The Miss Cabana pageant was a very big deal in the pageantry world for Port Elizabeth. Don't get me wrong, doing these competition gives you a kind of self-centered perspective with a lot of self-doubt mixed in. Not a good cocktail for a teenager. I definitely didn't see myself as a beauty queen. I got through to the finals, which entailed one-on-one interviews with adjudicators. I knew the right answers. I was Liz's daughter, who herself had pageants under her belt, a woman who trained many beautiful girls. I remained true to what I believed then of myself, my tomboy side. Maybe the judges liked this. I was different, a lady on the outside, young, crazy, and adventurous on the inside. Oh my gosh, rehearsing for that final was a never-ending story of me embarrassingly revealing my body to mom and dad in my white bikini and white high heels, strutting up and down until the muscles in my legs would burn and my feet would ache. They prepared me for every question. The finals started and it was my turn to go on. I answered every question with just the right attitude. Then came the final question. Well, who's your favorite band? I replied, well, I suppose I'd have to say that would be Steve Hofmeyr and Dusk. Of course, it was the band playing at the event, and at that, Steve and his whole band came and carried me off the stage. What a finale. We all lined up in semicircle, hearts pounding, holding hands, staring at the thousands of people who filled the valley. Standing on the stage, waiting for the winners to be announced. It's like cattle at an auction. The second princess was called, and it wasn't me. The first princess, again, not me. When they called my name as Miss Cabana, it was surreal. I had to hold on to other contestants for support. It felt like my legs were going to give way. They played that song, Simply the Best, by Tina Turner. I felt amazing. I had to wave at the crowd, was like a and walk to that song, and it was just a beautiful moment. Yarra was the queen, beautiful and full of promise. What I did with the rest of evening was sad for me. I left, headed to my boyfriend's, and got completely drunk in the pool and eventually naked in his bed. Just like turning something beautiful into trash. And I mean, that was pretty much what I did with my life. It was around this time that there was another suicide attempt. I say near this time because on visiting me at the hospital, my parents came along with a daily newspaper advertising me as Miss Cabana. My parents told me my behavior was unacceptable. Look at who I am, and this is not acceptable. I'm bringing shame on the family, and this needs to stop. Standard discussions when they were talking to me. By the time I went into grade 12, Boom had left school to start his trade. I found myself very lonely during break times, and by this stage had openly been called a slut. Flip, it cut deep. But sure, I can't blame anyone for saying this. My actions spoke volumes. If it wasn't one boy, it was the next, and always giving them what I wholeheartedly believed they wanted. Sex, each time at the expense of my soul. But now I had met Cez. He was also different, a bit of a nerdy rebel. We were inseparable. She lived a few houses away from our school, so we would often bunk the last period and go home early. It was a hangout spot for a select group of us. Not long into our matric year, after a massive fight with her mom, she decided enough was enough and moved in with her boyfriend. Something I found really cool, really grown up. I didn't know this at the time, but Cez was facing an all too familiar upbringing: booze, drugs, physical and sexual abuse. All this led to her moving out of the house. What? Okay. Is that all right? All right. All this led to her moving out of the house, stranded with no support. This, I am sure, is why we clicked right from the start. Lost girls feeding off one another's gifts as empaths for strength. We had so many good times, some bad times too. My parents had bought me my own wetsuit, my own surfboard, the whole kit. Looking back, I don't recall ever wanting something as a kid that we didn't get. However, there was never anyone to talk to. I'd arrived at a stage with school and my parents where there was absolutely no respect. If I didn't want to go to school, I wouldn't go. My parents would wake me up, and I knew the worst that would happen was I would get a hiding. The hidings were pretty standard by that time, so it really didn't matter to me anymore. They would hit me and I'd stay home. Mission accomplished. At 16, my parents phoned the school and told them I was refusing to go to school. And the school said, well, she's older than 16. There's nothing you can do. And I remember with my money that I won from the Red Cross and Miss Cabana, I bought my first car. Cez relied on me for a lift to school, although often she would choose out of her own not to come. There were many times now having my own car, I would listen to the wave report on the radio. And if they were good, school for the day certainly did not happen. So says would come with me to the beach and I'd go surf while she'd sit in the car or tan or whatever. Sometimes we'd fetch Boom from the college where he was studying a trade. Boom and I had broken up again, and I went to this party where he arrived with his new girlfriend. He had grown his hair, and both of them had their hair in like French plaits. I mean, oh, really cute. And I had quite a bit to drink. When I went to leave, I couldn't get my car started. And one of my friends, Shane, and some other guys helped me push start my car. I started the car and ended up traversing over Shane and broke his nose. The result of this led to me being shunned by Shane and quite a big biker crowd. I tried apologizing endlessly, landing on deaf ears. My behavior had gotten out of control, now hurting others, something to this day that unnerves me to the core. I'm bringing this up now because actually Shane's also in ministry at the moment. He does a lot of outreach work, helping people. We've gotten into contact again. We still crack jokes about this. He has me to thank for his rugged good looks because it's all about the angle of his nose. He laughs and teases back. Our matric dance arrived, and my partner was going to be Boom. My parents were totally not supportive of it. When I look back at this now as a parent, I can see why. But at the time it was all happening, I was devastated. My dress arrived at the last minute, the day of the dance, and it didn't fit. It was terrible. Mom and Dad weren't even there to take photos and send me off. I was angry, but mostly heartbroken. This was something I'd looked forward to throughout my school career. In my eyes, I had done everything they wanted, every photo shoot, fashion show, competition. Where were they? Or the cameras, now for my real life moment. The after party entailed a big get together for a bonfire at Sardinia Bay Beach. Cez and I got hopelessly drunk. Really adds to the effect. I woke up the next morning in Brendan's car, a dear friend, like a brother to me. There was no sign of Boom or my car. Brendan gave me a lift back to Boom's house. By the time I arrived, I found out how he and his French-platted lady had hit it off. He left me on the beach and took my car to get her and himself home. Turns out my parents had been right. I passed grade 12 and I don't know how I did. With school finished and another breakup with Boom, which got physical and very manipulative, it was time for a change. At motorbike races, he would deliberately wipe out or get into fights and blame me. It just got to a stage where it was toxic. Everything was toxic, even at home. I think we'll leave it there for tonight. I think I remember that the first question at Miss Cabana was, so if you win this competition and you win the money, what are you going to do with it? And I said, well, I will buy a sucker and suck on it until I can think what to do with the rest. I really was like such a broken shell. And, you know, when I read this, it looks like it's painting my parents as horrible people. And they were not horrible people. They were beautiful souls that were used by the enemy to really floor me. Does anybody have any questions?